Hey Reddit, when did your "something's not right here" gut feeling ever save you? My mom dropped my 3-year-old brother off at daycare before she had to work in the morning. When she got to work, she had this terrible feeling something was wrong with him. She ended up leaving work and drove to the daycare. She found the daycare lady inside sleeping while the daycare kids, including my brother, were running around the pool. My brother never went back to that daycare again. WTF kind of daycare would even have a pool? Those things murder the shiz out of little kids. In Canada, 50% of toddler drownings are in backyard pools. Kids drown so much faster than you think they could. Weird experience with a daycare here. 2. Started a new one. Dropped the kid off with bottles etc. Made a surprise visit with the wife about lunch and found our kid exactly where we left her, in the car carrier with the same now curdled bottle and a full diaper. Took the kid and left. Never went back. This is what scares the crap out of me. We have a 9-month-old in daycare. Visited a number of facilities. I was far from impressed with any place except where we're at. Most teachers, I guess we'll call them that, were just kind of existing in the rooms with the babies. Very little interaction going on. They were there probably with a baby, but no one looked happy in the room. We pay a whole lot of money for our daycare now. But the staff is wonderful. They all love their job. When we drop her off, she gets really excited to see the place and her teachers. We get to be worried about whether she likes daycare more than home. I had a gut feeling I should pull my wallet and phone out of my purse. Not even 20 seconds later, I get mugged. The man dragged me across the sidewalk and stole my purse, but all he ended up getting was a juice box and my birth control. What flavor was the juice box? And what flavor birth control? The exact same thing happened to my friend. Minus the juice and BC. An hour later she gets a call from a lady a few blocks away because she found her purse and random items scattered across her lawn. Forgot one. About 10 years ago. Working security at a site about 50 miles from home. Got off shift at midnight. And didn't bother to change out of uniform because I was only going to stop for gas. 2 stations in the town I was working in were open after midnight. But it slipped my mind as I drove past the first one. Pulled into the other. Same brand. Same gas price. Same sort of dump entirely, and just didn't like something about it. Nobody else around but Clark that I could see. But I decided to go back to the other one. Topped off and headed back out of town. I get close to that station again. 3 city cop cars. 2 deputies and a state trooper are outside blocking the road with guns drawn. Turns out a city cop walked in on a robbery. Dude put a bullet in his vest. And the store owner knocked the robber out cold with a bat before the cop could recover enough to get his gun out. That would have been me. In a uniform with a nice shiny badge. But no body armor. Wow. In all earnestness, you actually dodged a bullet on that one. My wife and I were in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night in rural Kentucky on a road trip. And for some reason we needed to adjust some of our luggage. I pulled into a gas station that looked empty so we could fix whatever the problem was. And parked in the middle of the gas station's unusually large parking lot. As I was walking around the car, I noticed that there were silhouettes of people surrounding the parking lot. It freaked me the frick out. And I jumped back into the car, locked the doors, and got ready to peel out of the place. I turned on my headlights as I was turning around. And they were just statues. Medusa almost got you. I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest X-ray, blood test for blood clots, ECG, and a few other tests, but all came back normal. After observing me overnight, everything still looked good. Oxygen saturation was perfect. My heart rate was still a bit elevated but nothing too crazy. And it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The doctor asks me how I would feel if they sent me home, and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such, and that I had no real basis for it except that I just felt off about it. He said fair enough. Let's try one more test, and if that comes back negative then we'll send you up to general medicine and see if they can track something down. That test was a VQ scan that found despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots. I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms and am on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling and the doctor who was willing to listen to it. EMT here. I was taught if a patient tells you they think something is wrong or they think they are going to die, you need to listen to them. Same for nurses. There is a legit nursing diagnosis called sense of impending doom that is in reference to this feeling. Someone can't explain what is wrong and there's nothing obvious. But we need to take it seriously. The body somehow feels something wrong when the brain can't find the words. I've found this to be very common with pulmonary emboli, heart attacks, and strokes. The body is so weird. I smelled burning plastic early in the morning at my family cottage and almost went back to sleep. I was around 15. But got up to investigate. A socket on the outside of the building had caught fire and flames were shooting up the wall. The rest of my family was still sleeping and there wasn't enough smoke for the alarms to go off. I ran and got the fire extinguisher. Got my dad up, and put it in his hands and pointed him towards the fire. Stopped it and called the fire department. It's for stories like this why I always get up when I smell something burning. I get really stressed out about it. 2 summers ago I woke up to the smell of fire and found out that a neighbor was burning leaves in his backyard and it had gone out of control. So scary. About 6 years ago I was up having coffee very early one summer. My husband and I heard an explosion and my meth addict neighbor screamed. He ran out back to see what was up. The guy was using M80s and a blowtorch to get the blackberries out of his backyard. He thought it was awesome. I'm happy he didn't burn my house down. We're in a downtown area where houses are detached. But very close. I was going to meet up with someone from Marketplace to buy a phone and the feeling hit me, so I called the woman and a man answered trying to play off the fact he's a man, and I passed by where we were meeting at and it was dark and I heard voices in the background on the phone call. I never stopped the car and kept going. Pretty sure I saved myself from at the very least a mugging, but learned a good lesson. Always meet in a public place. You can meet at police stations. I believe most are okay with this. Imagine how someone trying to mug people off online marketplaces would feel about this. Like if you gave them the address and they show up and it's a police station, like what would they do? Would they not show up? Would they show up and do the trade? Or would they ask to meet somewhere else because that would make it obvious? In 2004. On Boxing Day. Not me but my mother. Family trip including all cousins and extended family on my dad's side to visit the coastal south of Sri Lanka on vacation. About 20 people in all. Well-planned trip. Last moment my mother didn't want to go. No reason at all. None of us could get her to explain why, but she refused to go. So we went inland on a different trip to see some other relatives. Around midday. The entire extended family, now on both sides, was sitting shocked in front of the television watching the very same hotel we booked being washed away live by the tsunami. To date, she still can't explain what she felt. Thanks for the gold and silver, guys. Less than 3. I just refer to that as the don't fucking do it feeling, and I've felt it a lot in my life. Most notably was the time my mother wanted to go for a bike ride with me when I was little. Usual path, nothing strange. Well, this park we went to normally, and that happened to be the day that a car caught fire and had a huge fireball explosion next to my favorite slide like 20 minutes after we would have gotten there, and I would have been on or near that slide when it was basically melted. Just like yours. My mother suddenly decided not go. A last-minute decision. Bags packed and everything. And without any explanation, our first vacation was just cancelled. And that's why I didn't die aboard the Scandinavian Star in 1990. Thanks, Mom. Being the stubborn person that I am. I could have the worst intuition about a planned trip. Have Virgin Mary knock on my door and tell me not to leave and I still would. Not me. But my mother saved my grandfather's life when he had a stroke in his chair in their living room. We had all started to walk around the development. When my mother, after about 50 to 75 meters from the house, said, "I am going to go back and check on Dad," I went with her. And I nearly witnessed my grandfather die. He was on the chair, conscious, but unable to move or talk, just looking at my mother with bulging eyes. She called 911 once, then twice when she felt that they were running late. Ambulance came, got him on the stretcher, but it was too wide to fit out the door. We ended up tearing the door frame off to get him out. Because he was conscious, he actually remembers the ride to the hospital. He told us later that he heard the driver or someone say, "There is not a chance that this guy lives." That was when I was around 5 to 6 years old. He is still alive to this day. More than a decade later, at my mother's funeral, part of his speech was about how, without my mother's actions, he would not have been able to spend time with her during her final years of life. And for that, he is eternally grateful. I am terribly sorry to hear that your grandfather and yourself had to bury your mother. But you all had a few more years together at least. I was 15 years old and my mom dropped me off at McDonald's to get breakfast while she went across the street to get Starbucks. It was a shopping mall in suburbia and we were on the way to pick up a new kitten a few hours away. Instead of walking the 100 yards to my mom, I sat outside waiting for her to pick me up. Teenagers, I guess. As I'm standing there, a guy in an old station wagon with 2 kids in the back starts talking to me. He asks me where I'm going and I say whatever town it was. He says he's going there too with his kids and asks if I want to come. I tell him no, that my mom is across the street, and he comes closer. My gut is saying something is off, so I see a random woman walk out of Starbucks and I point to her and say, "That's my mom right there." He freaked out and left really quick. I still remember those 2 kids in the backseat. They looked so off. I wonder to this day if they are okay. This is one of the creepiest stories I've read yet. Also, at 15, why would you decide to hop in a stranger's car anyway? Presumably, if you say you're going to another town, you already have transportation. The Starbucks part reminds me of a time where I had walked down to a local Starbucks alone when I was in 8th grade. While waiting for a drink, an older man complimented my metallic red nail polish. He said he liked it, asked me where I got it, and said he was interested because he got a chip on his boat the exact same color and was looking for an easy way to patch it up. I was an outgoing kid, so I chatted with him with my hand stretched not towards him, out to gesture towards the polish. The weird part was he grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go. I got a weird feeling. But he just kept talking and holding my hand. Once my drink was called, I quickly pulled my hand away, grabbed and mad dashed out. Mild story, but it still freaks me out to this day. Not mine, but my dad's. I was downstairs helping him with some woodworking when I was 10 or 11. He went to run a 2x4 through the table saw when he noticed I was at his elbow rather than behind him. He stopped and told me to never stand behind a board when it's going through the saw in case it gets thrown. I thought he was being overly cautious and I didn't have as good of a view from behind him. But whatever, I got behind him. He flipped on the saw and ran the board through. He only got 1/3 of the way through, though, when the blade hit a knot and flung the 2x4 hard enough to crash against the wall 10 feet behind. If I hadn't moved, it would have hit me square in the chest and could have killed me. My former boss had a board kick out and hit him in the chest or stomach in his late 60s. They did an MRI or CAT scan. I never remember the correct terminology to check for internal bleeding. No injury found, but they found 11 aneurysms in his chest, stomach and legs. He had surgery quickly after to repair the worst and then multiple surgeries to repair the rest over the 8 years we worked together. An accident literally saved his life. Yeah. We had a cop here who broke a couple ribs on a call. Then had a heart attack as he was leaving the ER. Doc said it would have happened in the next few days without the extra excitement. But being right there made the recovery a lot quicker. My partner's dad found a brain tumor after a motorcycle crash because they scanned him for head trauma. Funny how things work sometimes. I had a teacher who was teaching in a class next to a woodwork class. The wall between the classes were very thin. When he was teaching, he had a feeling something's not right. So he moved away from where he was standing. Not a second later some shrapnels cut through the wall and flew past where his head was in the original spot. Turns out it was some kid using the circular saw and the tip of it flew off. If he hadn't moved he wouldn't be teaching today. Of course he wouldn't be teaching today. It's winter break.